Talk show host Tom Snyder joins Dave tomorrow at midnight on TV8.
This is the CBS Sunday Night News. Bill Plante reporting, good evening. As South Africans wait to begin voting this week in their first ever multiracial election, there was new violence today. A huge car bomb which killed 9 people and injured 100 or so others. Alan Pizzi reports.
The car bomb was clearly intended to harm this week's historical multiracial elections. It went off between 2 key offices of the African National Congress. An ANC official was among the dead. Police forensic experts did not point a finger of blame and no one claimed responsibility, but the prime suspects were the extreme right wing. Nelson Mandela told a rally of about 100,000 supporters that the ANC had a plan to end violence and the voting would go ahead.
We have closed an era of more than 3 centuries of white minority rule and oppression and exploitation.
The Zulu-based Inkatha party punctuated its last campaign rally with gunfire. The chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi deplored the bombing and urged his followers to fight through the ballot box.
No gains will be made in violent confrontation and hostility.
The already overworked security forces will now be stretched even further, trying to protect voters, polling booths, and especially political leaders.
Inkatha's participation in the election was hailed as a move that would go far towards ensuring a peaceful transition to democracy. Today's bomb blast has revived all the old fears of violence and chaos. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Soweto.
All quiet tonight in Gorazde, though there were reports of sniper fire earlier. Serbian troops torched homes and blew up a water treatment plant as they pulled back, but they did allow UN relief convoys. Barry Peterson has our report.
Serb TV showed it, the UN confirmed it. Serb forces leaving Gorazde, even moving heavy weapons, which NATO says must be pulled back by midweek. The ultimatum worked, without a shot fired.
I'm absolutely comfortable that we do not have to bomb our way to peace unless we really have to.
Serbs let the UN evacuate wounded, but delayed the process by searching the choppers going in and coming out. UN doctors, frustrated by weeks of killing, were furious.
So any delay we have, it is another death in Gorazde, and for me it is another way to kill people.
The airlift will go on for several days, the UN hoping to get the most seriously wounded out and trying very hard to get medical supplies in for those left behind. Among the rescued, 9-year-old Amina, her father long dead from the war, and her mother? The answer is lost in this war's confusion of life and death. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Sarajevo.
Official Washington was cautiously optimistic about the Serb pullback, but critical of the UN action yesterday, vetoing airstrikes which the NATO commander wanted. Bob Orr has more.
Cautioning that we've been disappointed before, Secretary of State Warren Christopher found some hope in the Bosnian Serbs' pullout from Gorazde.
It appears that the NATO ultimatum is working. Of course, we're monitoring the situation very carefully.
While the threat of airstrikes remains, criticism continues that the administration has been too soft on Serb aggression.
It was Serbia that invaded its neighbor and commenced genocidal practices of a criminal nature.
Leaders in both parties today said the West should consider expanding military operations by bombing Serbia. And they blasted a command structure that gives the United Nations veto power over NATO airstrikes.
If the United States is going to be involved, we should be involved through NATO, and we should frankly, politely but firmly ask the United Nations to step aside and allow NATO to be the lead agency.
Yesterday, the UN refused a NATO request for air raids as Serb forces were withdrawing from Gorazde. Secretary Christopher defended the decision.
You know, nobody wants to start the kind of bombing campaign that we would have to start there if there is a violation of the ultimatum.
Despite appearances, Christopher insists the United Nations and NATO are in agreement. If the Serbs fail to meet NATO's demands, the bombing raids will resume. Bob Orr, CBS News, the State Department.
Late word tonight of more heavy fighting between rebels and government forces in Rwanda, despite efforts at a ceasefire. The relief group Doctors Without Borders reports the slaughter of 170 patients and staff in a Rwandan hospital. The doctors group is pulling out of the country. Still ahead on the CBS Sunday Night News, preparations in California for former President Richard Nixon's funeral.
The world's first dynamo was invented by Werner Siemens in 1866. It began the revolution that brought electricity to everyone. That was then. This is now. The generation, distribution, and control of energy are at the heart of Siemens today, where you work, live, and play. And with 35,000 people at work nationwide, Siemens is leading the way into the next century. Siemens, precision thinking.
When you manage a restaurant all day, you need the strongest hold you can get. That's why I switched adhesives. Oh, that's good. Now I can sip hot soup at lunch. And still make it to dinner to greet my favorite customers.
Grandma! Even in the hottest liquids, when other adhesives stop holding, Fix-It-Dent holds stronger and longer.
It's a long, hard day, but I love every minute of it.
For the strongest, longest hold, Fix-It-Dent and forget it.
Japan will soon have a new prime minister. Morihiro Hosokawa and his cabinet have just resigned. This clears the way for Parliament to name his successor, Tsutomu Hata. Arriving today in Moscow, Yitzhak Rabin, the first Israeli prime minister ever to visit Russia. He wants Russia to take a more active role in the Mideast peace process. Rabin, who spoke at a Moscow synagogue, will meet with President Yeltsin and other Russian leaders. The PLO and Israel say they are only paragraphs away from an agreement on Palestinian self-rule, and they're talking of a possible signing ceremony next week in Cairo. Difficult as those nations have been, they are only one part of an overall agreement between the Arab nations and Israel. Secretary of State Christopher is on his way to Europe and the Middle East tonight to work on another piece of the Mideast puzzle, getting Israel and Syria together before it's too late.
I think there's a feeling that the atmosphere in the Middle East is turning sour, and this is a time to try to refocus attention on positive steps that can be taken in the peace process.
Since President Clinton met with Syrian strongman Hafez Assad in January, the massacre in Hebron and the Palestinian reprisals have slowed the peace process, though Israel remains optimistic.
We do have the feeling that this could be an important trip in which yet another brick is laid in what eventually will become a new wall or a new fence on the regional landscape.
For Israel and Syria, the big issue is the Golan Heights. Before Israel took control of the Golan in the Six-Day War, Syrian gunners rained shells down on Israel. Now, even though Israelis have settled the Golan, the Israeli government is talking openly about giving it back.
It could happen sooner or it could happen later. We don't count weeks here, but 1994 has been defined by us as a year of decision.
The U.S. role now is to be the broker between Israel and Syria, perhaps eventually to help with the security arrangements, as it did in the Sinai, but most of all, to try to get things moving.
I think we could see, before the end of the year, the basic breakthrough on the agreement on the package.
Of course, actual implementation of any Syrian-Israeli agreement would probably take much, much longer. But it is an effort the Clinton administration will encourage and for which it would love to take credit. Voters in El Salvador today picked their first president since the Civil War ended 2 years ago. First official returns show Armando Calderon Sol of the arch-conservative ruling party well ahead. His opponent, former guerrilla leader Ruben Zamora, has conceded defeat.
I'm so bad, that's why I'm glad you're so good. If you're bad about loving rich desserts, you're gonna love Smart Style from Mrs. Smith's. Sinfully rich, yet they're made with sensible ingredients that can still be part of a smart way to eat. Smart Style desserts. Go ahead, live well, eat well, have dessert. I'm so bad, that's why I'm glad you're so good. Thanks, Mrs. Smith's.
With all I've got to do, I can't afford a sleepless night. So when I feel I can't sleep, I take Maximum Strength Nitol. It's safe and it works fast, and that means a better night's sleep.
Get to sleep in minimum time with Maximum Strength Nitol. Here's something new for your sensitive teeth.
No way. My dentist wants me to use Sensodyne, remember?
This is Sensodyne. New Sensodyne with baking soda. Well?
No pain. And I love that clean feeling.
Sensodyne, now with baking soda.
He tops the scales at 315 pounds, and today Dan Big Daddy Wilkinson was the top pick in the NFL draft. The All-America defensive tackle from Ohio State went to the Cincinnati Bengals. San Antonio's David Robinson turned it on tonight to win the NBA scoring title in the last game of the season. Robinson scored 71 points to catch and surpass Orlando's Shaquille O'Neal. Robinson is only the fourth NBA player to score more than 70 points in a game. Finally, the United States will pay its last respects to the